Joining us on the line is Senator Ted Cruz, of course, from the great state of Texas, sits on the Committee on Foreign Relations, Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation, Committee on the Judiciary, basically all the important committees. Senator Cruz, great to talk to you.
Ben, always good to be with you. Thank you.
So one of the things that obviously the American public doesn't watch too closely until it breaks out into the headlines is what's going on in foreign policy. The Biden administration, as disastrous as they have been on domestic policy, shockingly, they have somehow been even more disastrous on foreign policy. Between the pullout from Afghanistan and the green lighting of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, basically they've signaled to Vladimir Putin and the Russians that they can do whatever they want. It is highly ironic that in the aftermath of the Trump administration, where the entire media suggested that Donald Trump was a cat's paw of the Russian government for 4 long years, it turns out the Biden administration is far weaker when it comes to Russia than the Trump administration ever was by orders of magnitude. Maybe you can give us an update on what is going on in Ukraine, because Putin has not withdrawn the nearly 200,000 troops he has stationed on the border over there.
Well, Ben, that's exactly right. And fundamentally, what we're seeing play out is a difference between two visions of foreign policy, a vision of strength versus a vision of weakness. The left has always believed that appeasement is the right approach to foreign policy, that if you look at the Biden foreign policy apparatus, what you said a minute ago is exactly right. Their domestic policy has been a disaster. Their economic policy has been even worse. But both of those pale in comparison to the utter train wreck that is their foreign policy. And it started most significantly with Afghanistan, when Biden pulled us out of Afghanistan at an absolute chaos, disaster, surrender, abandoning Americans behind enemy lines. That display of weakness was seen by every enemy of America. And it was seen by Russia, by China, by North Korea, by Iran. Every one of them was taking the measure of the man in the Oval Office. And they concluded that Biden was weak and ineffective, and he wouldn't stop their ill intents. Now let's fast forward to Russia and how this plays out with Russia. Vladimir Putin is a KGB thug. He used to run the KGB, and he still behaves like he runs the KGB. He has said before that he considers the dissolution of the Soviet Union to be the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 21st century. What is Ukraine? Ukraine is the country directly to the west of Russia. Used to be part of the Soviet Union, a very important part of the Soviet Union. When America won the Cold War, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine broke off to be an independent nation. And Ukraine has aligned itself, instead of aligning itself with Russia, has aligned itself with America, has aligned itself with Europe. The people of Ukraine have said, we want to be with the West. We don't want to be under Putin's tyranny. We want to be free and have a vibrant democracy. And so they're allies. Putin wants Ukraine back. He wants to reassemble the Soviet Union. Now, in 2014, Putin invaded Ukraine, came into Ukraine, a region of Ukraine called the Crimea. People remember when the Crimea was invaded. But he stopped. He didn't go all the way into Ukraine. And there's a reason he didn't go into Ukraine. He didn't go into Ukraine because Russia's principal source of revenue is selling oil and gas. You know, John McCain used to refer to Russia, said, Russia is a gas station with a country attached. Putin is funded by he's a petro tyrant. And their natural gas goes through Ukraine to get to Europe. And so the reason he didn't march tanks into Kiev is because if he had, the Ukrainians could have destroyed those pipelines, which would cripple Russia economically. They wouldn't be able to get their natural gas to market. That was 2014. 2015, Putin begins what's called Nord Stream 2. Nord Stream 2 is a big natural gas pipeline under the sea that is designed to go directly from Russia to Germany to cut Ukraine out of the process. They started building it in 2015. In 2019, I introduced legislation to stop it. And I got bipartisan support. Democrats and Republicans supported my sanctions legislation. It passed the House overwhelmingly. It passed the Senate overwhelmingly. Donald Trump signed it into law. And here's the amazing thing. Putin stopped building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline literally the day Trump signed my sanctions legislation into law. Not even the next day or the next week. That day, the pipeline stopped. For over a year, the pipeline lay dormant. It was a hunk of metal at the bottom of the ocean. And then Joe Biden came into office. Immediately after Election Day, Biden began projecting weakness and surrender to Putin. Biden was sworn in January 20th of 2021. Putin began building the pipeline again on January 24th, 2021. Literally 4 days after Biden put his hand on the Bible, Putin said, build the pipeline again. What we're seeing now is over 200,000 Russian troops on the border with Ukraine. The Biden administration has declassified their projections that we're projecting an invasion as soon as January or February of this next year. And the reason this invasion is real is because Biden waived the sanctions that I had authored, the sanctions that were working. He waived them, gave a multi-billion-dollar gift to Putin. And now Putin is confident he can get his gas to Europe, and we are facing another foreign policy disaster. And the Biden administration, sadly, is learning that weakness and appeasement invites aggression.
Senator Cruz, the Biden administration has responded by suggesting that maybe they'll put some sanctions back in place, or maybe they'll strengthen some sanctions. Joe Biden openly said that we're not going to be putting any troops into Ukraine. Maybe in response to an invasion, we'll put some troops on the border of Ukraine, which is basically saying, well, after you invade, maybe we'll do something, which is a hell of a statement from the president of the United States. What do you make of the idea of further sanctions on the Russian regime, particularly use of the SWIFT international transaction system in order to cut down on their ability to receive money, for example?
Well, I think it's all ludicrous that nobody believes it's going to happen, and in particular, Putin doesn't believe it's going to happen. It's interesting. When Biden waived the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, everybody was upset. Republicans in Congress were upset. Democrats in Congress were upset. Ukraine and Poland, two close allies of ours, said publicly in June of this year, said that Biden was inviting Russian military aggression against Ukraine, that was going to be the consequence of it. Biden didn't care. The only stated advantage, like you ask yourself, okay, why would they do this? The reason they stated they did this is Germany, in particular, Angela Merkel, wanted it. And, the Biden foreign policy team, I've joked that they sleep with votive candles of Angela Merkel under their beds. They revere Merkel. And so they said, all right, we're going to make nice with Merkel. Now, the irony is Merkel's out of power. The German people voted and threw her party out of power. The new government opposes Nord Stream 2. So literally, the only benefit they got was to say that was goodwill with the outgoing head of government in Germany. The consequence was undermining Europe's security, undermining America's security, enriching Putin to the tune of billions of dollars. And now they're claiming, well, okay, where's the pipeline now? The pipeline is built. So Joe Biden, because he waived the sanctions, he let Putin complete the pipeline, but it's not on yet. To turn it on, it has to be certified. It needs government regulatory certifications. Those are pending in Europe. And the Biden administration, it could have stopped construction of the pipeline if it simply kept the sanctions in place. It didn't want to do that. Now what it's saying is, well, if Putin invades Ukraine, we'll impose all these sanctions on Russia. The reason nobody finds that remotely credible is they're not imposing sanctions now. It's better to stop the invasion before the fact than after the fact. And one of the things they're saying is, well, we'll let Putin turn on Nord Stream 2. But then, if Putin invades Ukraine, then we will sanction and shut down the pipeline. Well, once the pipeline is on and they've shut off Ukraine, you're going to get to February of next year when the Europeans are getting their natural gas that heats their homes, and you're going to ask the Europeans, okay, now freeze to death and turn off the heat at your homes. It's an absurd threat. It's why Putin wants Europe subject to this economic blackmail. And the Biden administration, it is a threat that Germany knows is a joke. It's a threat that Europe knows is a joke. And most importantly, it's a threat that Putin knows is a joke. If you want to stop the invasion, do it before the invasion happens. And by the way, it's not just combined with waiving sanctions. So the Biden administration is also doing two things. Number one, they halted the delivery of a couple $100 million in weapons to Ukraine. Now, you mentioned Biden said we're not going to send troops. I actually agree. We shouldn't send American troops to Ukraine. I have no interest in sending our sons and daughters to go fight the Russian army. That is an exceptionally bad idea. But there are all sorts of ways to resist Russian aggression short of putting American servicemen and women in harm's way. Ways like sanctioning Nord Stream 2 to stop Ukraine geopolitically and economically from coming in, but also providing weapons to the Ukrainians so the Ukrainians can defend themselves. They want to defend their country. And the Biden administration is saying, nope, we're going to stop Ukraine from getting weapons. So we're going to enable Russia to cut out your energy infrastructure. We're going to cut off your weapons so you're helpless. And then the Biden administration is demanding that Ukraine cede sovereignty for portions of its country to Russia. It is literally appeasement. It is reminiscent of Neville Chamberlain going to Hitler in the 30s and saying, a peace for our time. That is Joe Biden. Just give up a portion of your country and Putin will be satisfied. Putin will not be satisfied until the tanks roll into Kiev and he controls all of Ukraine. But Biden is using America's force to say, well, surrender one piece at a time. And if you're really weak, then Putin will leave you alone. It is hopelessly naive, and it's really, really dangerous.
Well, Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, thanks so much for the insight on the issue. Obviously, we all ought to keep it front of mind because Vladimir Putin is not shy about using force. Senator Cruz, appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben. Always good to be with you. And by the way, we discussed the issue in great depth in my podcast, Verdict with Ted Cruz, with your friend and colleague, Michael Knowles. And so we have the last pod we did was about 45 minutes of geopolitics on Nord Stream 2. And so check that out as well. And always great to be with you, Ben.
Absolutely. And you should definitely check out the Verdict with Ted Cruz and the execrable Michael Knowles.